Okay. Hey everyone, I am really excited to have Melissa with me today. Melissa and I go way back and connect for a long time. She has such a great career journey, and I'm really excited to chat with her today, learn about her latest venture, and also just a few other things she's worked on in the past. And I think it'll be a really great insight into building a company and just kind of like building yourself and connecting with others. So Melissa, thanks for joining Inside the Workflow today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
So I want to just start out, with your history. You've got a great path and pedigree, and obviously I want you to talk about Outlever a little bit in your latest venture, but tell us about your moves from we first connected when you were at Chedder, and I was at Adobe, and then Buzzsprout, ClickUp. Tell us kind of how you started those things and any pivotal moments that kind of like shaped your path or made you realize you want to do something different, or where you're kind of at now.
Yeah, I mean, I think my career has sort of been a mix of, gut intuition of like where I've been pulled, and then a mix of just the need to disrupt. And those two things have sort of guided me throughout everything I've done. So, what got me into marketing wasn't just a need to like be a marketer. It was really a need to disrupt and change the status quo and challenge. And that's why I joined BuzzFeed early on. I just believed in the vision of disruption of digital publishers, and the fact that, a linear method of distribution wasn't going to be the future of how content and social and things were shared forever. When I started at BuzzFeed, it was basically like you either go to a website, or you go to a magazine stand, or you have a newspaper delivered to your door. Distribution was completely linear, and obviously we are very, very, very far from that now. But back then that was really it. And advertising was not social, it wasn't content, it was just static banner ads. And I just believed that the future was probably brighter than that and had a lot more to offer. And I wanted to be at the, leading on the cusp of whatever that change was. And I've kind of just followed that journey throughout everything. At Chedder, I went to Chedder because I believed in the fact that people would cut the cord with cable, which again, now, like, I say that and it's like, of course, who has a cable subscription? But that was a huge bet. No one had cut the cord with cable. People weren't, subscribed to 10 different streaming services, and none of the ones that we have today really existed back then. So I say the things that now seem very obvious, but when I took the bet on them, they weren't at all. And I always like to be kind of ahead of that and take that bet on the things I believe in. And it's really led me in every next chapter that I've been in.
That's really cool. Yeah, I've definitely respected you going on those different paths. And I think it's great when it works out, right? Like in that you've been able to learn some really cool stuff. Like I think back on, I happened to be at Adobe when they were moving from selling box products to SaaS. And that was just such a journey, fits in line with like BuzzFeed was such a first mover in like digital content creation and SEO and those types of things. I'm sure it's been really great and inspired, a lot of what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's and it is always great when it works out. Yeah. Or at least it works out to a point, I mean, I think everything has a window in time in which it can thrive. And, obviously like the future exists on where it's headed next, and it leaves some of those pieces in its dust, and things evolve. And like obviously like Chedder isn't what it was when I was there, and same thing with BuzzFeed, which is now not doing very well. But I think being on the cusp when it is like the future of what it should be is really where I am, where I see myself best.
And those have kind of come together, obviously, with ClickUp as well, and kind of learning the infrastructure of a big tech company growing fast. How has that kind of helped you transition to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've also always tried to be a very well-rounded individual in craft. And I think when at Chedder, I was running sales for the majority of it. And the realization there was, I don't know if I'm as well-rounded as I think I am as just a marketer, purely marketing. And I wanted to be on the sales side of it. And, I think doing that and then sort of having the experience in marketing and sales on the consumer side, and then going over to SaaS just kind of made me dangerous in a way that I needed to be ever be out on my own. I definitely believed in the fact that SaaS was the future of where, a lot of innovation was headed, and I knew I needed to be a part of it. But, I think you only know in hindsight how much it really impacted everything that you know about, or every reason why I am where I am today. It's because I learned it from ClickUp. Just having that understanding of growing a SaaS company from Series A to Series C, and what that entails, and the infrastructure, and how you have to build it out, and product like growth, and just a million things I had no idea about, being kind of thrown into the driver's seat of that so fast, and having to learn so quickly and build that. I couldn't obviously do what I'm doing today without my knowledge and the skills and just the experience that I had at ClickUp.
I love that you said that, because I think looking back on my own career, and we're in similar parts of our journeys, but I think I would suggest that to a lot of kids coming up is hey, spend some time at a big company. That is good, right? But see how complex operations are, see how you have to work with lots of different teams, and then take that and start your own thing, right? Eventually, or go to a startup and you have all this wealth of knowledge. I think it's such a really cool thing to learn from.
Yeah, or the reverse, honestly, or just go to a startup and learn it from the ground up, and
Sure.
go to a company where you have to wear 1,000 hats, because there isn't that infrastructure, there isn't that bureaucracy, and there isn't that we've done it this way. So you just have to figure everything else out for yourself. I think I entered into the perfect SaaS company at the perfect time, because my lack of knowledge of SaaS was actually really good, because I never had a playbook to go back to. And our founders weren't SaaS veterans either. They had started companies, but not in SaaS, and they weren't, beholden to this Silicon Valley SaaS playbook. And I think that made for the perfect environment for me to be able to, flex my own skills and learn, and also just kind of steer the ship in a direction where I probably wouldn't have had that opportunity had it been a larger company with more experienced veterans from, titans of industry,
I love that. So you just went out on your own, founding this company. There's a million things to do. You've worn a lot of different hats, worked with a lot of different teams. How do you stay focused, ensure you're driving the results that actually matter, and really growing from the ground up?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's unparalleled focus on the three core principles that matter within every company, right? It's growth and ARR, it's customer happiness and satisfaction, and it's data and making sure the motion actually works. And I think the obsession on these three things, you can't really deviate much from them. And I think if everything points back to those three things, and you can direct your team to just ruthlessly focus on those priorities, you're going to be in a good spot. So I think there's, there might be a little bit of and there is a reason we didn't take money. So we're self-funded, and there's a couple of reasons we did that. One, I don't know if I believe in that model anymore that much. I think I do for specific types of companies, and for companies where you have to disrupt a billion-dollar category, and that's what you're trying to do, or multi-billion-dollar category, you have to raise money. But for us, there's an opportunity for us to be able to really focus and prioritize and make sure we're thinking about things correctly. And I think the constraints of being self-funded actually allow us to do that better. The creativity that we have to be able to grow and build this. And I mean, it's really interesting. We see companies raising $50 million that are doing less than 1% of what we're doing, which is exciting. It's also intimidating for sure. But I think it makes us be a little bit more creative with what we have to do. So there's definitely a kind of ruthless prioritization. I think the lack of external funding makes us have that even more, where we have to stay focused on these three kind of core pillars and tenets of our company. And if these are working, we will succeed. So it really just comes down to you have to redirect people a lot, because their thinking can be really great, but they're thinking too far kind of outside the scope of like what actually matters. And it's normal. People get excited, but it's like we have to, if nothing else matters if these things don't work.
I love that. So yeah, like have the big goal in the distance, but you've got to come up with the process to actually get there. What is kind of your like workflow habit you've implemented that's had a big impact on productivity, or really, hey, we want, by the end of the year we want to have this. Here's what we need to do each month to get there.
Yeah, that's a great question. Like work management, project management, like I will shout out ClickUp again. Like it keeps us completely organized. It gives us our goals, our tasks, like daily, weekly, monthly. It's definitely like the organization of that is very important to be able to like follow and then have other people understand what's important and core. But in terms of just workflow, like, it's me and my co-founder and I think we're a team of 6 now. So it's 4 other people that are full-time. And then we have a team of freelancers and journalists that work with us as well. But, I am sales and marketing and I have my mandates and I have my workflow and I have exactly what I focus on. And it's me, it's just me. And then the rest of the team is tech and editorial. And the tech team, they know what the mandate is at any given time. Like there is just, we have to build this by end of month. We have hard deadlines, hard dates. And, I think we're just, it's such a small, lean team that there's not a lot of bloat. There's not a lot of people sitting around wondering what they need to do. That's again, like I think it's a function of we didn't overhire because we can't overhire, and we're hiring because we know exactly what we need to build and who we need to build it with. And I think that just keeps us ultimately focused. Like I think there's not an issue with a lack of focus. I think the biggest challenge for us is that there's a lot we want to build. There's a lot of exciting pieces of like our product. And, I think we've like realized maybe less than 10% of the entire vision of it, but that 10% will allow us to do whatever we want. But it's hard not to get distracted when, there's a lot of things you can build. The other thing I'll say is, I don't know, this is like hard to say because it sucks, but you can't build for one customer. And I think you can kind of get into the trap of you have a customer that's very needy, or they want you to build in a different way, or they have different needs. And the real reality is 99% of your other customer base, they don't need what they need. And you kind of get to a point where you kind of have to fire, your customers at some point, because it doesn't allow for scale. It doesn't allow for the vision to be fully realized if that's the one customer that's kind of holding you back. So I think it's really, it's understanding like where the, where the ball is going, and like, and kind of, skating to that puck and like understanding that, and then like, and cutting where you need to, and making decisions fast and making them quick, and just having an understanding. But I've always heard that too. And we experienced it at ClickUp as well. Like, sometimes you'll have this big behemoth of a customer come in and they'll say, hey, they'll dangle the 5,000 seat, number in front of you. And they're like, well, if you just build these 10 different things for us, we'll sign on. And, that's like a lot of ARR, and everyone gets kind of swept up in this. Oh my God, like, what does that mean for our company or our business? And we have to refocus and reprioritize all of our end resources on this one customer, because that's going to like set the precedent for our entire enterprise business, or so on. Right. And just always the wrong move. It's always the wrong move. And I think we're seeing it less than that, but we see it a little bit. And we've made a lot of conscious decisions to not go down that path, because I just see how it ends every time. It just doesn't work.
I love that you brought up not being a custom dev shop. Early on in a startup. I feel especially early on. Well, I mean, pretty much always, but for sure there's always that like customer that comes in as a lead, they love it, and they have 10 requests, and you suddenly aren't able to actually help your other customers because your resources are focused on someone who may or may not actually join you.
Or early days, you thought that something was going to be a much more important part of your business model than it is. And in reality, 99% of your customers don't want that feature, but one does. And it's like, how do like you have to prioritize? It's a ruthless prioritization. It's like, which path are you going to pick?
Can you share a time when you faced like a bottleneck in the process? So, I mean, it sounds like you've created a really great workflow. You have tools to help you with productivity. What do you do
Yeah,
when you kind of hit some friction?
it's every day. I mean, friction happens every day. And I think there's this will be an unpopular one as well. I think that we've tried to solve things with humans sometimes that AI is actually the answer for. And we've fought against it a lot because we want to believe that like there's a human touch that is needed in certain areas, where the reality is that that's not true anymore. And I think we're, sometimes you're fighting against this, like the thing that really is what actually makes sense for scalability for long term, because you don't want to believe that that's the answer. But I think sometimes you just have to lean into it. And if you fight something 10 different ways and it still doesn't work, I think you lead yourself into the answer. So I think it's basically like, you got to be flexible enough to have put work into something and completely pivot and think about it a completely different way.
Yep.
And do that 3 or 4 times. And if you're still hitting bottlenecks, maybe that's not the answer at all. And I think like the ability to throw thinking out completely is the most freeing and it's the most freeing and beneficial thing that you can do in a company, which is really hard. I mean, you get emotionally tied to things. It's hard. You put a lot of work into them. You put a lot of man hours and equity into them and sweat equity into them. And to be able to throw something out and say, scrap that month of work because we figured out a new way and a better way to do something is, I think, is really the way that you need to think about it as a startup, a lean startup specifically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that you brought that up. And I think it's really important to just understand that he said it happens every day, which is so true. And when you run into those things, like, what do you think? You've got a team of 6 now, or a company of 6. Like, what do you think makes a great leader? Either in a fast-paced, high-growth company like you've been at, or when you're starting things up and really people are looking at you as the visionary, and how do you kind of navigate those things?
Directness, transparency, quick decision making, explanation of decision making, but not over justification. I think there's just no bullshit, no bureaucracy, no politics. We make decisions that make sense, that are logical, because that's sort of where our brain, like where we see it going. And I think that communication down to the team of why the decisions are being made the way they are, and sort of that high up, like, this is how you work with me and how I work and how I think, just breeds a kind of a healthy culture, a healthy like way of working, a healthy team camaraderie, a healthy view into the future. I think it's, highest level is like how we view the future and what that looks like and why we're doing what we do and what the motion is, and how we believe in it. And then, how we work too, like layer that down, like how I think, how my co-founder thinks. We obviously we're different people. We have different working styles. We have different communication styles. And I think for our team, that's important for them to understand, like, we're different people. And this is how we work collectively and how we work separately. And then the third is just communication and being overly transparent about, hey, we're scrapping this because of X, Y, and Z. This is how we're moving in the direction. I think the worst thing that happens is like, sometimes, I mean, I've seen it mostly at VC funded companies, but you see a lot of pivots made very fast where there's no communication or transparency down to the layers of the people that are actually executing that.
Yep.
And that breeds just a ton of frustration. And a lot of times, like, those are coming so high up, they're coming from the investors. They're not even coming from the executives. So you're getting like layers and layers of decisions that are then going down to the people that are executing. And then it's changing every day. And that just breeds to frustration, poor morale. But when it's, us making the decisions, and there's very straightforward of why we're making them, and we communicate them directly to our team, there's less of that. But, we're also not beholden to investors, pulling strings based on, impulsively pulling strings based on, a month of data. So I think it's just a lot simpler when you're not, you don't have a board behind you. Not that we won't ever have a board. It's just right now we're able to make decisions based on what we're seeing and kind of like, really, really quickly.
So I'd love to dig in on that a teeny bit. So what is, let's say you become 1,000-person company. Every 1,000-person company or larger wants to like pretend they're a startup, right? Like it's a really fun time. You're all working together all day. You've got some really clear goals. How do you think about keeping this culture that you have now with 6 people and keeping that collaboration going as the company grows and scaling the culture with the growth of the company?
Two things. One, if we become 1,000-person company, we lose. Like they're like, we should never become 1,000-person company. I think we can max out at 30 people. Like this company should never be more than 30 people. And that's because of basically AI and ML and everything that we have now available to us as tech. I mean, 5 years ago, I would say, yeah, we need to be more than 1,000 people, but we don't anymore. And I think that's just the reality of it. So if we ever get past that, we lose because the model wouldn't work. But the reality is just scaling culture is, it comes down to who do you hire? I don't know. I mean, I think hiring is the most important thing that you can do. You either hire people that add to your culture or additive and are net positive or detractors, right? And I think if you hire the right type of people that are all in it for the right reasons, then there's belief and there's passion and there's growth and there's that growth mentality of people that just want to learn and get better and build and be on the cusp of what the future is. You have that there. And then you can continue doing what you're doing as a leader. I think that, works, but I think hiring is just the single most important thing that you can do. And it's hire fast, fire fast. Really, I think people are like, oh, hire slowly, fire fast. But I think the reality is like, when it's right and when it's not right. And I think waiting to make those decisions just delays it for both the person where it's not a good fit for them and it's not a good fit for you. And it's just better to kind of cut it when it's not working. And I think, we've made our mistakes and we've learned a lot in the past year that we've been building this. And I think that it's really all about hiring. It just comes down to hiring, comes down to getting the right people in the right seats and getting the right mentalities and the right people and mindsets. I think, people are at a big crossroads with their own work, right? And you see a lot of people that are hungry for jobs and hungry for work. And I've interviewed a ton of people, and listen, we're like people that are open to work, different industries, backgrounds. I actually don't care about resumes at all. I care a lot more about how does that person think?
Mm-hmm.
And like, how do they think about the future? How do they think about go to market? How do they think about like where they sit, what they're interested in, where they collide and what they've experienced? Like, I care much more about that than a resume. But on a lot of job interviews, like you find a lot of people that are just so hungry to like find a job that they're not talking enough about like their unique viewpoints. And I think that's really like where we hire people that are special, that like believe in see the world that we see, the way that we see it. But my advice would be like, think a little bit about where you stand on things, because everything is changing and it's a very exciting time. And if you see the future the unique way that a lot of other companies do, you'll land a job. But we see a lot of people in the market that are just like so hungry for something that they don't stand for anything. Which is it's an interesting time to be hiring.
Yeah, and you brought up AI. We're definitely in like a contraction piece of tech where like things got really fat with like remote work and COVID and like forcing these new functions.
Yeah.
What are some other ways you mentioned AI, which can be a part of the answer too, but what are some other ways you're seeing companies, you've got a lot of experience in media and tech and all that, but what are some other ways companies are evaluating their strategies and future growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the mandate now, it's so interesting. It's like we are still seeing like that whole growth at all costs, we're seeing the same bubble with AI, which is actually really interesting. But I think companies are now, we have to do more with less. Like that's it. Like it's the age of just growth at all costs is forever over. It's we have to do more with less. The old playbook is just not working anymore. So I think companies are like cutting a lot of, like, at least the brave marketers are cutting the things that really have not worked historically and that are, you know, just not working and are not scalable. And they're trying to figure out what's next. Like I think there's a lot on the cusp of like being able to change marketing forever. And I think a lot of it also goes back to relationships. And I think the people that are going to thrive and the bold marketers are the ones that are like thinking about what's next. There's a lot of people that are, and there's a lot that aren't. And they're just sort of like sitting there like, oh, you know, maybe we'll go back to the age in which, like, you know, budget just comes back and it's like fluid and it's flowing and we have as much money as we need. But yeah, I think companies are just evaluating their marketing spend overall. Like it's there's definitely just like it's harder than it's ever been to market. It's harder than it's ever been to reach people. There's definitely bloat in every category. You know, there's a lack of differentiation. People are competing on price. And I think it requires just bold ways of thinking to kind of evolve and move forward. And I do think you can do more with less. I just think it just requires a different way of thinking.
I agree. You know, we've gone a lot onto workflow and company building and that type of thing. You and I connected a couple of years ago now on a book I've been producing and should have done. Well, it's done, but should have published. Talking about burnout and balance. You know, you and I were talking briefly about what you did over the holidays. What are some things that you do to kind of manage priorities, find some time for yourself, not let being a founder just completely consume you?
You know, the interesting thing about like what I think about this a lot actually, and like burnout for me in my past roles was actually not burnout in the work itself. Like I love the work actually. I could work 24/7. I'm that type of person. It was more the anxiety about the work and the Slack anxiety and the communication anxiety.
Sure.
And it was everything that wasn't actually important to the work. And it's so funny to see that now because it doesn't matter. Like I'm you know, my co-founder is actually my husband, and we spend the weekends talking about work, and we go out to dinner and we talk about work, and we're in the car and we talk about work, and it doesn't matter. It's exciting. It fuels us. We're driven. We're motivated. We obviously chose this path together, and none of that can, you know, none of that burns me out.
Sure.
But the Slack, the anxiety, the not knowing. So I think what I'm not in that place anymore, luckily, but I try to just make sure that I always think about that as it pertains to the people that work with us and our team, and that they're not feeling that from us, because it's definitely hard work. It's hard mental thinking. It's like a lot of loops that you're kind of constantly putting your brain through. But I think as long as they're not, you know, there's not this Slack anxiety, there's not this he didn't respond to me anxiety, I wrote this whole thing and there's no emoji on it anxiety, you know, like, I mean, these are all real things that I dealt with. And I think that really contributed to my burnout more than the work. I think it's less about the work and it's more about the nature of like the social politics around the work.
That's really interesting. I like how you said you put it down to the team level of almost like if you feel like you can remove it from the culture, from the team below you, then it almost like helps you overall. So it's almost like putting it on yourself from a leader delegation side versus like, you know, I can control that piece of it and that will help reduce what I'm feeling.
And honestly, like certain founders like would probably disagree with me. And I think what they do is they purposely burn people out. They get as much as they possibly can out of them, and they rinse and repeat, and then they make the next hire. Like there's definitely a method to that madness. And I just don't want to subscribe to that. Like that's not a healthy culture that I want to build at our company. And I don't think we need to do that to be able to be successful. but certainly like it does work for other people. And I don't want to discount that is like definitely a playbook. It's just not my playbook.
So if you go back to the start of your career, what's one thing you would tell yourself process-wise that would have helped you a little bit more than when you're just starting out?
Process-wise, think actually one thing, which is a weird thing though, it's all the small decisions really add up and they really matter. And it's the things where every single day you make 100 decisions and you feel like those decisions go nowhere. But in a year, you look at all those decisions that you've made and they meant a lot, one thing that I wish I did since like day one of my career, which I'm doing now, is the things I learned this week. Like, oh my God, I wish I started that years ago. I started it midway through ClickUp and it's a wealth of knowledge and I can go back to it anytime and see how I was feeling. Something I did, something that went right, something went wrong. And oh my God, like literally it's a little triggering, honestly, like going back to that stuff, but it's so valuable. I wish I had that because sometimes your brain almost blocks you from going back to periods of time that are like, highly stress inducing or kind of contributed to burnout or something bad, but they actually are very, very beneficial to go back to those. And this notebook that I created just allows me to go back to frames of reference that I might not be able to go back to myself. And it really helps me unlock a lot. Oh, I was thinking about this way. I mean, the parallels between our business now and the things I've learned and the things I'm able to pull from are incredible. It's just, I have to unlock myself to be able to get there.
That makes a lot of sense. I like that. Yeah, I remember you talking about journaling in our first conversation years ago. I think that's really cool and yeah, valuable intel. I want to give you a chance as we're kind of closing things out. Share your vision behind your new company. What inspired you to launch it? How does it differ? What are some things that you've learned from it? Those types of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really the culmination of my entire career over the past, 13 plus years. And my co-founder is my husband, and I feel like having your partner as your co-founder and sort of the background of your career is almost like a secret weapon. Yeah. And he's been kind of productizing my brain in the way that I think about things for a long time. And now it's kind of come to fruition. But effectively, at BuzzFeed and at Cheddar, we were building these media companies and these news corporations to have an authoritative voice within, news media. And really why we were doing that is to sell advertising to B2B advertisers so that we could lend our voice to them so they could establish their own credibility and authority, but through us. And at ClickUp, I had a very, very large marketing budget and I was able to do a lot of cool things, Super Bowl ads, billboards, SEO, everything. But our TAM was so big that to be able to have the conversations that mattered to our entire customer set in a way that we could own those conversations, it just didn't exist. So at Outlever, we turn companies into their own dream trade publications. And we allow them to own all of the news that matters to both them and their customers on a daily basis. So it's really like owning conversations at scale and being able to have conversations at scale with the people that matter. So talking to their ICPs about the things that matter in their day-to-day. I think there's just a huge gap in sort of where marketing and outbound sales has led us. And, we're really good at talking about ourselves as companies, but talking and having those conversations about the things that matter to our customers on those 364 days a year where they're not buying software is equally as important. You get in their heads, you're able to think about how they think about the world, and you're able to own that narrative and build your own credibility without having to borrow it from a Forbes or a Chedder. You're able to actually build that and create an asset that can grow in value over time for you. So, there's a lot of reasons why I created it, but it's really that culmination of like, I don't believe that media companies have the legacy and the credibility that they once did anymore. And it opens up the door for companies to be able to own that and be able to have that credibility and build that credibility themselves. and have those conversations with the people that they want to have them with. And also, I think relationship-based selling is going to be the future of selling, and outbound sequences from AI are just going to die because it's a race to the bottom. I mean, I don't know about you, but the sequences I get daily are just they're unhinged. They're unhinged, actually. So, I think it's just taking it back to how do we start a conversation? How do we talk to people? How do we build credibility for companies, and how do we allow them to own the narratives that they care about, and kind of really build themselves as a thought leadership platform?
I love it. Yeah, I think it's such a great idea, and you guys are doing a good job building it. And I'm really excited about what you're putting together. Melissa, you're a legend. Thanks so much for your time today, and glad you could join us.
Thanks so much for having me.